Welcome to Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco, bringing you interviews with industry experts and regular folks who tested the job search waters and succeeded, and strategies to tell your story and land you job interviews in 60 days, guaranteed. Here's your host, Virginia Franco.
Welcome to the Resume Storyteller podcast. This is Virginia Franco, and today I have as my guest Marc Miller, who is the founder of Career Pivot, an organization that helps those in the second half of life to design careers that they can grow into for the next 30 years. He is the author of Repurpose Your Career, a practical guide for the second half of life, published in April of last year. And he was recently honored to be on the nextavenue.org list of the top 50 influencers in aging for 2017. Marc, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
It's great to be on your show.
So give us a little bit of background. How did Career Pivot come to be?
Well, it's a long story, but I'll keep it short. I don't look like most people in this industry. I'm a recovering engineer.
Okay. You live to tell the tale?
Yeah, there's a 12-step program for that. I spent 22 years with IBM. I basically wandered around a lot in those 22 years doing all kinds of different things. And then in 1999, IBM screwed me on my pension, and I gave them the single finger salute, and I left and went to work for a successful startup. We were acquired by Lucent. My options were worthless, but I got enough pension bonuses such that at 46 I was debt-free. I had funded my kids' college education, and then on July 11th, 2002, I'm a big-time cyclist. I came down a hill at about 25 miles an hour, turned into a blind turn at the bottom of the hill, and plowed into a Toyota Corolla going about the same speed, going the opposite direction.
Oh, my goodness.
My buddy who was in front of me thought a gun had gone off. I spent 5 days in the trauma center. I tore up a knee. I broke a hip. I dislocated a shoulder, broke a bunch of ribs, broke the clavicle, had imprints as the helmet in my head, but I had no internal injuries and no brain injuries I'm willing to admit to. And they had me walking on crutches in 3 days. They threw 3 titanium screws in my hip, not steel, but titanium. They had me walking on crutches in 3 days. I was back on a bike in 10 weeks. I was flying back to China in 4 months. Oh, by the way, I flew right smack into the middle of the SARS epidemic in Guangdong province. That's what I like to refer to as my WTF moment. My son had just graduated from high school. He was heading off to college. I'm going, why am I doing this? So I went off the following year, and I volunteered for a layoff. I then went off and taught high school math in an inner city high school for 2 years. I commonly joke, I've been teaching adults for 20 years. I've done it in 40 different countries. I assumed that the school systems would want me. I had been doing adult education. I was an engineer. There's a shortage of math teachers. No, they didn't want me. I got hired.
Yeah.
Well, they don't want 40-plus-year-old guys. We don't do what we're told. They want nice, compliant people, and I'm not compliant.
Not you. Okay.
And so I did that for 2 years, was very successful, could not do that and stay healthy. Okay. I came out of there, I got involved with a job club, which I've been now involved with for 12 years now, where I noticed that many of the folks my age were getting spit out of IBM and Dell and Motorola and Freescale and all being lost. I then did a 1-year stint doing corporate fundraising for the Jewish Community Center. Okay. As I joke, being a non-Jew, being the face of a Jewish organization is interesting. I realized I could not
I'm surprised I hired you, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a long story. But I joke, I relapsed. I went back into another startup, and I rode out both recessions at successful tech startups. My timing could not have been better. I hired on with my second startup in December of 2007, right at the beginning of the recession. And that did not end well. We got acquired. Back in 2009, I started looking at who was looking at careers for, at that time I said baby boomers. I now say those of the second half of life. And the answer was virtually no one. We were all supposed to go retire. Well, the reality is about 80% of us won't be able to retire because we don't have enough money.
Right.
So the whole idea that we would ride off into the sunset after 40 years of working, and of course, in my case, after 2/3 of that time, they moved my cheese. And the rules changed. So I formed Career Pivot I launched the brand in 2012, looking at, okay, how do we move and pivot to whatever is next? This is not about going off and going from being an engineer to being a pastry chef. It's about pivoting your way along so that you can maintain an income because you still need to work and make money.
So it's not total 180. Sometimes it's little micro moves.
Yes, I claim I've made 7 pivots. Essentially I've had 7 careers. Each one of them I refer to as been a half-step career change.
Yeah. Each builds on the other.
Well, I had 1 foot in the old world, 1 foot in the new world, and there was always a relationship that took me across. In other words, I never did it alone.
Yeah.
And that's one of the fallacies that most boomers, particularly male boomers, say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it on my own.
You think that's males more than females do that?
Yeah, very much so. I don't like asking for directions.
Yeah, well, Like, that's why they make story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Right? It's one of these deals of where I was raised to be self-reliant. I shouldn't have to ask for help. Well, yeah, you do.
Yeah. But you need that relationship to carry you across.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll use the example. When I was teaching high school, my first year I was teaching 3 sections of Algebra 1. I was assigned a really good Algebra 1 mentor. And I was teaching Algebra 2, and I was lost. And I finally, after about 6 weeks, walked across the hallway and down the hall a little bit, and there was Jana. Jana was 27. She'd been teaching 3 years. And I went to her and said, can I have your lesson plans, please? And what I did the rest of the year was I stayed 2 days behind her.
Okay.
Right?
That's a relationship, right?
I played puppy dog. In other words, she handed me the lesson plans. I'd look at them. Usually I'd pick them up on a Friday. I'd look at them for the next week. I would then, if I needed to, which I did twice, I could go down and watch her teach the lesson.
Okay.
In other words, I sucked it up and was humble.
You just learned, right? Yeah.
I didn't know what I was doing.
In terms of challenges, the people that are out of work or, they're looking for their first job in many, many years, do you feel like that's one of the biggest challenges they face is that notion of self-reliance, or is there something else that you see additionally that sort of trips them up?
Well, if you haven't looked for a job in, say, 10, 15 years,
right,
as you know, the world has changed.
So much has changed, yeah.
Right? How you find jobs. If you think you're going to get online and look for jobs in your 50s, it's going to be really, really hard. I claim for those of us in the second half of life, our next job is not going to come by applying. It's going to come by through a relationship. And that will either be an existing relationship, it will be what I refer to as a weak tie, a loose relationship, or a relationship you are going to newly mint and acquire.
A new one. Okay.
Yep. And I'll use the example. When I was looking for my teaching job, my most valuable connection was my chiropractor.
Really?
Well, think about it. I joke. Michelle's the other woman in my life. I've been with her for 30 years, and she knows a lot of people. Those are often referred to as weak ties. Another really good example, if you have kids, your kids' friends' parents.
Yep.
Right?
So the second tier group.
Well, the idea here is these are people you have a relationship with, and they know people you don't know. People who know you really well usually know the same people you do.
That's a good point.
So I'll use the example. I worked with a gentleman several years ago. On my blog, there's a post on the Introverted Sales Guy job search. And he worked in a fairly obscure industry selling equipment that packaged food. And we rebranded him, but the key piece was he found his next job. And by the way, he was 59. He found his next job through someone he had worked with 15 years earlier and had not talked to him in probably 10 to 15 years.
We reconnected. So what do you say, and this just happened to me this past week, a woman that I've worked with for years, and she said, this job search has been so much harder than the past because my network is retiring.
Yes.
So in terms of forging those new connections, where does one start?
Well, I would start out by, I like to look for people who look, taste, and smell like you. And that is getting on LinkedIn and get very specific on skill sets, ages, demographic, and start reaching out to people. Now, I'm going to give you a real outlier example. I had a gentleman contact me who had, for the last 15 years, was living in Africa translating Bibles into obscure languages. He had a PhD in linguistics, and the theological side, the religious, the spiritual side of what he was doing was very important. He was very mission-driven. And they came back to the U.S. and said, what do I do now? I said, you need to find people who look, taste, and smell like you. And I said, my thought was, go look at the top-tier PhD linguistic programs, find people who graduated 5 years earlier and after you, and search their profiles for certain keywords. And then, where are they working? What are they doing?
Sort of reverse engineer it. Okay.
You got it. And one of the challenges a lot of folks of my age, I'm in my 60s, yes, we have, our network is aging out. They are either retiring or they're stepping back and no longer in influential positions.
That's right.
Or unfortunately, they're dying. And it's starting to get very, very strategic at where I build that next relationship. And it's like, where?
Yeah.
Where do I want to go next? Right before this call, I'm working on a blog post where I've talked to 3 individuals who are chasing positions that are targeting millennials. And I'm going, stop doing that. There are age-friendly.
What do you mean they're targeting the 10 millennials? That's who they're trying to, the leadership of the millennials, or the people they're trying to reach out to?
Oh, no. Like this one gentleman, he was pursuing a position for the third-party recruiting that had a very specialty area, and it had a 12-week training program. Well, these kinds of positions, they want to bring in the millennial. They pay them very low with a high commission structure. They know that 50% will not make it through the 12-week training program. They know that a certain number will only last a year to 2 years, and they'll start all over again. It's somewhat of a churn and burn kind of environment. They're not going to invest in a 50-year-old guy or something like that, right? And the second example was a woman who is a Java programmer. She had reinvented herself and gotten a job, but she keeps on getting passed over for younger people. And with promotions, and she doesn't fit in. And as I had at my last startup, I had a gentleman I worked with who in his previous job asked, why aren't you promoting me? And they told him, you don't have enough career runway. We are not going to invest in you.
They said that?
Yes. Well, when you get in your 50s, are they going to invest in a 30-year-old or are they going to invest in a 55-year-old?
Sure. Right.
Okay. But there are environments that are very age-friendly. We have one employer here in Austin that is very well known to be age-friendly, a technology company of no less. So they do exist. A lot of it, you're going to find them in state and local federal government.
Okay, yes, that's true. That's full of career changers.
Well, one of the things you'll find, I had a client who came out of one of the big tech companies, and she was over at one of the major agencies here in Austin, Texas, and she joked the fact that she was managing these development projects, and she said, you know what, I miss my kids. She used to manage a lot of projects with 25-year-olds.
Oh, funny, yeah.
And she says, all my developers are all in their 50s. So,
okay. All right. And you feel like you can find those sorts of organizations that are age-friendly by finding people that look, smell, taste like you and figuring out where they are.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, I work with most people that come to me are looking for jobs. And usually, a lot of times it's, they come because I'm a resume writer. They come to me and they say, my resume's not working. What can you do? And a lot of times it's about more than just the resume. What advice would you give someone who is trying to make a pivot or trying to land a new role and they're just not having success?
Okay.
Where do they start?
Start out by having a very clear message. And it's very often saying, what are you looking for? Well, I'm looking for an employer that pays well, has good benefits, has good work-life balance. No, that's what's in it for you.
Right, not what's in it for them.
What's in it for them? So the first thing is get really clear what's the benefit you provide. I like to say, I want you to think like a consultant, okay? You solve problems for your company, your employer. What are those? Then go look for companies that have those problems.
Okay.
Now, one of the things that you're going to find is a lot of jobs don't get posted.
No, they don't.
So what you want to do is, it's too easy to go find hiring managers, peers. I call this a targeted job search, where you are reaching out to people. I claim reach out to target 25 companies and start reaching out. And there are three kinds of people you should reach out to: hiring managers, people who could be peers of yours, and recruiters. And by the way, when you do this outreach, you're going to get a lot of silence.
Yeah.
Right? Not everyone's going to respond. But if I reach out to 150 people and I get a 20% response rate, I get 30 people I get to talk to.
That's right.
Right? That's 30 people. I can find out things like, do you like where you're working? What's the process of the hiring? You know, one of the things
all you need
that
is a few to answer those questions.
Yeah, I mean, what most people don't realize is, okay, you have no idea whether the company has any idea what they're doing when they hire someone. I hate to tell you this, but most companies suck at hiring people. I mean, it's like looking at job descriptions. My last job, I was a manager. I wrote a job description for several jobs I was looking for. By the way, I am not qualified to write a job description.
No, they're archaic a lot of times.
I wrote the perfect purple cow job description. My ideal candidate did not exist, right? And
another reason why you need to bypass job postings.
Yeah, right. So, both jobs we filled through referrals.
So in terms of reaching out, do you recommend sort of a multi-pronged campaign, email, try to get phone numbers, try to do in-mail, try to find people who know those people?
Yep, I will try and do every which way. By the way, one of the best things to do is pick up the damn phone.
Yep.
And a lot of people put their phone number in their LinkedIn profile.
Yep, I always tell my clients to do that.
I mean, it's amazing the number of recruiters that you can get a hold of by calling them. And yes, you can find their phone numbers. But one of the challenges I find with a lot of folks I work with is they fear the rejection and they fear the quiet. So I have a classic example. I have a woman in my online community now who has been unemployed for a bit. She's been doing a lot of freelancing and trying to get a full-time job again in her late 50s. And she interviewed 2 weeks ago with a local association. She didn't feel the interview went very well. The job got posted again, and she was suffering from what I call MSU. She was making stuff up. So she was getting all down, and she was about to go in for another interview. I set up a time to give her a little pep talk before her interview. And as soon as we got on the phone, she says, you know what? That association that I thought I did so poorly, they called me back in for another interview.
Oh, my goodness.
And all the anxiety she caused herself, because the fact is no one had responded.
Right.
And the reality is she had no idea why they hadn't responded.
Right. Now you can make it into a much bigger deal in your head. That's true. What do you say? I love this advice, but I feel like getting that clear message and being able to start targeting involves you knowing exactly what you want to do. What do you say to those people that are ready for that next pivot and they could go in a couple different ways and they don't know what to decide on? Again,
one of the key pieces is to get outside of your own head. This means hiring a coach, help find colleagues who will help you, find out what you're good at. I'll use the example. Several years ago, I worked with a project manager, and I said, so what makes you special? And he couldn't really tell you. So I said, go talk to 5 people you used to work with who really liked working with you, and what made you different? And what they all came back was, they all said, you know what, you manage these huge, complex projects, and you always manage to come up with reasonable solutions. We have these complex problems, and you'll come back and say, we just need to work harder and push up the deadline. You'll come back with stuff that actually works. And to some extent, it's starting to identify your superpower, and very often you can't do that on your own.
So take that example that you just gave. What did you take from identifying the superpower that made you say this is where it makes most sense to go in this direction?
Yes. It did land him his next job, which unfortunately died. And this gentleman is a classic example of he has been affected by creative destruction.
Oh.
He, for years, managed very large, complex computer hardware projects.
Mm-hmm.
Those don't exist anymore.
Not hardware.
People building huge hardware, the IBMs, the HPs, those are gone.
Yeah.
In fact, I have an article in Forbes right now called Living in a Career Disaster Zone at the Age of 65. And this is one of the key pieces. In fact, I'm talking with several people right now where as they make these shifts, you need to look at 2 years out and where will things be 2 years from now? And will it have legs?
Try to be a little future-proof.
Yes.
Short-term future-proof. Okay.
Because things are changing so fast. I've spent a lot of years in the tech community, and I can tell you that technology, what the tech community looks like 15 years ago, looks nothing like it does now.
Yeah, nor will it in 15 years. You're right.
You're right. And so, yes, you need to do your homework. And so right now we're working on, okay, what does he want to do next? And the gentleman is now 66. And it's starting to getting clear on what will people be willing to pay him for and what would he like to do.
That will be viable 2 years from now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a real challenge. Because, by the way, I didn't grow up thinking about that I was going to get to do something I wanted to do at work.
No.
I grew up to say I was supposed to get a job. I was supposed to support my family. I was supposed to pay the mortgage, put my kids through college. Fun? Something I wanted to do? Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't think of that.
Selfish, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
So
that makes sense. You're right.
In fact, I was just interviewed here recently there's an organization in Austin called Giving City. And the woman interviewed me about, how do you find your passion in the second half of life? And the interesting one was a lot of people, when they find their passion, it's usually due to a calamity in their lives, a child, right? Something happened, cancer in the family, right? In my case, it was like my case, right? But what happens if you don't have that? What if you've had a nice, smooth life, and suddenly you're going, I want to do something different and special, but I don't know what that is. What I told her is this is kind of like when you're 18, you don't know what you don't know. Sometimes you just need to go try stuff. And sometimes you need to go try stuff randomly because you might actually find something more interesting because, you threw a bunch of stuff against the wall and see what stuck.
That's a sticks, right. Yeah, no,
right?
Excellent.
Right, and you kind of go, okay, let me go try this. Because, again, we very often make stuff up. Well, I can't do that because no one's going to want me. And how do you know that?
You get in your head. Yeah, you get in your head. Absolutely.
Well, it's kind of like when I went to work at the Jewish Community Center. I said I could do this, and I could go work for a nonprofit. By the way, I can't work for a nonprofit. I am way too...
Testing it out, and you realize it did not stick, but you tried it.
Yes. Not just that nonprofit, but nonprofits in general. I've served on a lot of boards. But the decision process is very slow. It's consensus-based decision-making. I'm sorry.
Not for you.
Not for me.
Well, all right. I want to switch gears here. I'm really eager to hear your take on this. This always comes up, age discrimination, when it comes to hiring practices. And since you focus on people in the second half of life, not on the other end, I want to hear your thoughts on the topic. And if you give one piece of advice or two pieces of advice to someone who is facing it or afraid to face it, what do you say?
Okay. Number one, age discrimination is alive and well. Mm-hmm. You're not going to get it to go away.
Yeah.
There are really two things. Number one, think about how you act, online, offline, in person, how you appear. People will discriminate on age largely based on how you appear and how you behave. So I've got several image consultants I use who, will redress my clients, particularly my guys.
Okay.
It's called Get in Shape. Go exercise. Yeah. If you act older, they will perceive you as being older.
How do you act?
Well, it's everything from, are you energetic? Do you shuffle into the room? Put it bluntly, I'm in my mid-60s now. And I work with folks, I'm sorry, when they walk in the room, they shuffle.
My goodness,
If you don't, so there's that piece. Then on the other side is, okay, go find age-friendly places.
Right.
I mean, I've had several folks who've been in the technology business or have shifted into the technology business later in life. And one of the things they complain about is, God, I got to work with a bunch of these kids. Well,
Pick the wrong place.
It's the wrong place for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Unless you want to work with people that are all ages like that.
Right.
Right.
It's in my last startup. My IT guys were all young kids, and I was sold up to be their father. And I would walk into their office, and there were cables everywhere. And I'd look at Tony and Matt, and I said, guys, if you don't clean this up, I'm calling your mama. And, I gave them grief. Now, every time they did good work for me, I sang their praises,
right?
With their boss. And Matt gave me one of the best compliments ever. He just looked at me and he looked at his buddies and he says, you know what? He talks to us like we talk to us. So, think about, it's not just the job, it's who we work with. One of my mantras is, it is more important who we work with and the environment than what we do.
To the corporate culture.
Right? I can put you in a job you love and give you a team you don't like, don't reward you, give you a crappy boss, and you'll be miserable. I can give you a job you don't like, but put you with a bunch of folks you like, and and give you a boss and reward you, and you know what, you'll be okay.
You tolerate it. That's a really good point. And that's part of doing your homework and talking to those people to get that feel. No, I agree.
Right? Because most of us leave jobs not because of the job, because of the people.
Yeah, you're right. They're miserable, and it's always the people or the circumstances. That's right. So for those people that are looking for a new job and looking to make a pivot, what are one or two tools that they need in their toolbox that they absolutely cannot be without during the journey?
Okay. Number one, don't do it by yourself. Find someone. Find a coach. Use your spouse. Find your best friends. Find a support team. Find a accountability partner.
Yeah.
Inside of your head is a very lonely place. It's very dark. It's very dark in there. And two, it's getting that outside perspective. So one of the exercises I do is, number one, I'll say, go find 3 people you know from work and 3 people you know from your personal life. And can you give me 3 to 5 expressions or phrases or words that describe me? I guarantee you there will be something in there that will surprise you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what that whole those 360 feedbacks, that Reach 360 to learn about yourself. Yeah.
Yep. The other little exercise I do, I use the Berkman assessment, but you can do this with any one of the assessments, is pick out the strength phrases that you thoroughly think that describes you, that you agree with. Then translate that into your own talk, and then translate that into a narrative.
Yeah.
When someone says, can you tell me about yourself?
Tell me about yourself, right.
Right? You can talk about who you are, not what you've done.
That's right. How you can solve the person's problem. You're in a better place to, what you can do for them and like that.
Yes.
Aside from the accountability partner, what else do you recommend as a must-have?
As a must-have is, again, it comes down to, I could easily say go hire a coach, but most people aren't going to do that. Yeah. But I can't give you another based on who you are, because we all need different kinds of things.
Okay.
Like I said, I've sent a number of my clients. I have an image consultant I send them to, and I've had a couple that it's been life-changing.
Transformational. That's amazing. Yeah.
I mean, I had one gentleman, former Navy submariner, she threw away all his clothes, completely redressed him.
Like that TV show. They go into your closet and toss everything out. Yeah, I want that.
But by the way, she did that to me. She threw away half my clothes, made my wife very happy. By the way, I have no taste. I have none. No, when it comes to colors, 0. Now I get compliments on my clothes.
There you go.
And as I said, I'm a recovery engineer. So, for me, the biggest thing is getting the outside perspective.
Get it. And it needs to be someone who's truthful, who's not afraid to say, you have no taste in colors, that kind of bluntness.
Well, one of the things I joke about, I worked at an IBM briefing center for about 7 years. So I was presenting to customers. And when my son was about 10, I went out to buy some shirts, and he picked out some shirts. And one day at work, I walked in and said, Mark, you look really spiffy today. I went, Happened again about 2-3 days later. Next week it happened again. I'm a recovery engineer. I can see patterns. I was always wearing a shirt that my son had picked out. Okay.
Love that. I love that.
Right.
It makes perfect sense. So that you're in that accountability partner, whether it's a coach that you pay for or a friend that's going to tell you like it is.
Yep.
Someone who knows you well. No, I agree. So what is next for you? Tell me what you see for you in the next few years.
I am right now building an online community that I'm onboarding my second cohort. It's rather interesting. I have developed curriculum for adults and technology in 40 different countries. And one thing that I learned a long time ago, no matter who I think the audience is, I'm always wrong. It's always different than you expect. So the way I'm approaching it is I brought the first 20 in. I'm going to bring in next month. I'll bring another 10 more. And I'm saying, okay, what do you want? And I am now developing the curriculum. And right now it's around blogging and LinkedIn. And the next thing I'm going to do is start doing some sessions on business formation. A lot of the folks
When do you think it'll be up and running?
It is up and running right now. Okay. I have a waiting list. If you go to careerpivot.com/community, you'll be able to put your name on the waiting list. And I'm carefully selecting each 10 as they come in. And the idea is this will play out over the next 6 months. But the key piece is those who come in early are going to get to define what gets created. And as I said, the common theme of everyone right now is everyone wants freedom. They want freedom to work how they want to work, where they want to work, and when they want to work. Because a lot of folks have obligations, both children, elderly parents. Just two, they need their horizons broadened. Things like I'm bringing in someone who helps people publish books and get their books out. By the way, you can publish a book. I mean, I put out 3. It's not that expensive. You have to produce something good, but you have to go get the right resources. And there are people out there to help you.
That's right. And being self-published now is very different than it was 30 years ago. In terms of getting it done. So, in terms of broadening people's horizons, making them see that there are there's ways that you can achieve that freedom.
I mean, my latest book, I'm probably going to sell 1,000 copies this year.
What's your latest book?
The Repurpose Your Career, a practical guide for the second half of life. As I said, I'll probably sell 1,000 copies this year. Is that going to make me an Amazon bestseller? No, but for a self-published book, that's pretty darn good.
Pretty good.
And give you an idea, that book, if I give it away, costs me $3. It's a credibility builder.
Yeah, that's right.
When I wrote my first book, I managed to get an article into Forbes. Why? Because I had a decent book.
That's right.
Right. And what's happened is many of us, we need to brand ourselves. And now it's to the point of show me your stuff. Don't tell me you know your stuff.
That's right. You need some sort of a social proof. That's what I always call it.
Yeah, I've got a client in Germany who's rebranded himself, and he's a CIO of a small to medium chemical oil company, 500 employees kind of size. And he wanted to get into digital transformation. So he created the digitaltransformationblog.com.
Did he really?
That blog has got him speaking gigs all over Europe now and landed him his next job.
Wow. With a side income from speaking.
Right. Yeah. And he's having a blast.
That's wonderful.
And one of my biggest challenges with him was be bold. You know your stuff. Be bold.
He just needed to get out of his head?
Yes.
Be able to do that? No, that makes total sense. Well, Marc, thank you so much.
You've
given such incredible advice. And I don't think you mentioned it, but I just want to put a plug in to check out your podcast. You could download it on iTunes or anywhere.
Yes, you can go to careerpivot.com/podcast, and that will take you. It's on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and now it's on Spotify.
Oh, okay, very good.
I love saying Spotify.
Spotify. Well, thank you again for coming. I think a lot of this advice is relevant regardless of what age you are, but for those of us in that second half, very actionable. So thanks.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco. To learn more about storytelling strategies to catch the eye of today's SCIM online readers, hiring and decision makers, go to www.virginiafrancoresumes.com.